type a message if this is actually working, just so that I know I'm not talking only to my computer here. All right, so we'll start with Jai Radha Madhava as usual. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nastapraya Shiva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya Bhagavatir Tamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So welcome everybody to this evening's Sunday Peace Lecture. I can't see you, but hopefully you can all see me. I have a little bit of a live audience here at Krishna House, so I'm not only talking to my computer. All right. So today is going to be maybe a little different because, like usually, I would choose a verse and then recite the verse and speak on that verse in purport. But today I'm going to do like an overview of a few chapters of the Bhagavad Gita because recently in one of my Bhakti Shastri classes we were discussing Bhagavad Gita, and one of my students, who's here right now, one of my students said, you know, I'm having a hard time with chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita. I can't understand like the usefulness of it. How is it different from chapter 3? They both seem to start with the same question, and they're both talking about karma yoga, and it just seems very random. And you know, what's the point? How is it progressing? So then I would like to go over chapters 3 and then briefly touch on chapter 4 in the middle of those, and then go to chapter 5 and focus on how is Krishna's teachings in chapter 5, how has it progressed from chapter 3, and how has Arjuna's consciousness also progressed, and what does that mean for us? And especially I feel that there are some important messages there for our particular situation in time right now in this coronavirus situation. So we'll try to look at Arjuna's situation, what Krishna is saying, how it's important to us individually and collectively in the world today. Okay, so chapter 3 starts with Arjuna asking a question. And it says, he says, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? And then let's just jump forward to 5.1, where he asks the similar question. He says, O Krishna, first of all you ask me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial? So in both questions he's kind of asking basically to fight or not to fight, right? If intelligence is better, why do you want me to fight? And then he's saying, well, if you're asking me to renounce work, then why do you want me to fight? So it seems like Arjuna is just kind of stuck in the mud over karma yoga, and he hasn't really heard the whole chapter 4 about transcendental knowledge. But if we examine the question closer in light of Prabhupada's purports and also Krishna's response to those two questions, then we can see that there's a very big difference in what's going on in Arjuna's mind. So, what's happening in chapter 3 is that, as most of you know, in the beginning, before this, when Arjuna's in the middle, he's on the chariot and he's in between the two armies, and he sees in front of him all his, well-wishers, and he sees his teacher, he sees grandfather Bhishmadev, he sees his cousins, and his whole family is there. And he's thinking, how am I going to kill these people? This is such a terrible thing to do. And so he's very torn between his duty and what he feels is the right thing. And so he presents arguments. But his arguments, as Krishna points out, are basically mundane. Right? He's concerned with killing the body. He's concerned with incurring sin. He's worried about the destruction of the dynasty, about women being polluted, about unwanted progeny, and how are the family traditions going to be maintained? Who's going to take care of make sure the community projects are going? And so it's all, what pleasure will we derive? How will I be happy by killing my family members? So it's a little bit mundane and also a little kind of, you could say self-absorbed. It's from his own point of view, right? He's thinking, what's in it for me? How is this good for me and my extended family? So he's seeing it like that. And then, so then when he asks this question, it's really like his question, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think intelligence is better than fruitive work? He's really like, he's trying to get out of it. And that's what Prabhupada highlights in the purport to 312. He says that, it says, in other words, Arjuna wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting by using Krishna consciousness as an excuse. So it's very interesting, and it seems that Srila Prabhupada, has some experience with that in his lifetime. People using Krishna consciousness as an excuse for not doing anything. So that's exactly what Arjuna is trying to do. And so then in chapter 3, if we kind of go through the main points of chapter 3 and look at how Krishna responded to that question, because it was coming from sort of material consciousness, then the answers that Krishna gave were basically material reasons why he should fight. They were kind of external or just very pragmatic, materially pragmatic reasons for fighting. So first of all, in text 8, he says, perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. So it's like, yeah, do your duty because, you need to keep just to maintain the body, everybody has to work. So that's just like, you got to work because you need to earn money because you need food on the table, so go do your job kind of thing. It's just very pragmatic. And then another similar type of answer that he gives is in texts 10 to 14. He's talking about how, if you do this as a sacrifice, then the demigods will be pleased. And through cooperation between men and demigods, then prosperity will reign for all. So it's all about, material prosperity. It's similar to, the sort of nowadays you have this Christian prosperity gospels. You worship the Lord and, do your religious duties nicely, and then you'll get money, you'll get everything that you want materially. So again, another external material reason. Then we flip over to 26, he says, so as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. So this is the argument. This section actually starts with 21, with the famous verse where he says, Yat yat acharati shrestas tat tat eve taro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokas tad anavartate. That whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. So he's saying, Arjuna, just do it, do your duty, because then, after all, you're a great personality, you're a leader in society, you're a member of the royal family, so everyone's looking to see what you do, and if you're going to be irresponsible and abandon your duty, then they could follow in your footsteps, and then the whole society could become dysfunctional. So that's another material reason. We want society to go on, we want everyone to keep working, we've got now we're all experiencing a situation where people are stopping working. Many people in the world today are not doing their duties, not because they don't want to, but just they can't. And so, there's a lot of problems that are coming from that, like a lot of essential services are being able to continue, but, a lot of things are kind of collapsing, and we're probably going to be feeling the ramifications of that in the near future. So people need to keep working, and Arjuna needed to set a good example that way. Then towards the end of the chapter, where Arjuna brings up the question, what is it that we're driven to do things as if compelled by force, even against our will? And then there's a whole discussion that ensues from that about lust. And so, Krishna gives doing your duty as a way of controlling lust, because it involves regulating the senses. Karma yoga is about engaging the senses in a regulated way, and that way you can overcome lust. So, so he's giving all of these very practical reasons, very practical but kind of mundane, because Arjuna's consciousness is mundane, and so Krishna is just responding to that. It's just like when we're, when we're talking to someone, we're trying to share Krishna consciousness with others, we need to see where their consciousness is at. If they're very kind of just absorbed in mundane consciousness, and we try to give like a very exalted Bhagavatam lecture, they're not going to be able to relate to it nor accept it. So we need to meet people where they are and then try to gradually uplift them. So that's what Krishna is doing here. He's meeting Arjuna down on the mundane platform, giving him mundane reasons why he should engage in his duty, because by doing that duty, he'll gradually be uplifted, and he'll set example for others to also be similarly uplifted. Then at the end of chapter 3, he takes it to a slightly higher level, where he starts explaining, because before this he's talking about just engaging the senses. Just engage your senses, just get your arms and your legs and pick up that bow and put the arrow on it and release it. Just engage your senses. But then he's saying in text 42 of chapter 3, he says, the working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. He's giving him a little knowledge of the soul, that actually you're the soul. It's not just about the senses and the material problems and the material discomforts of doing your service, the material problems of doing it or not doing it. It's actually you're a soul, and he's trying to bring Arjuna up to that transcendental platform. And then, appropriately, the next chapter is called Transcendental Knowledge. So that verse 42 is kind of the little link into the next chapter, that you're actually transcendental to all these things. So because of that, I'm going to give you transcendental knowledge. And then in chapter 4, Krishna really, he pours it on. He gives the process of acquiring transcendental knowledge through disciplic succession. He tells Arjuna that many births both you and I have passed. I can remember, but you can't. So then he's again saying that you're an eternal soul. It's not just about this lifetime and your social situation within, your present situation. You've been through many lifetimes, and he's trying to get him to broaden his scope of concern, basically. Then Krishna tells us all about himself, his appearance, why he appears, how he appears, when he appears, and what he does when he appears. And he goes into karma. He talks about tyag, giving up material attachment. He talks about how to spiritualize matter, which is very important for spiritual beings to live in the material world. We have to learn how to spiritualize matter. And then there's many verses about sacrifice, different processes of sacrifice, about approaching a guru. And then he finishes up by glorifying transcendental knowledge. So I thought that one very interesting verse there at the end of chapter 4 is 439. It's interesting in the context, because what Krishna says here is, a faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. The word there is param shantim, supreme spiritual peace. And I thought it was interesting that Arjuna is standing in the middle of a battlefield on the brink of a huge fratricidal war, and Krishna is talking about yes, just fight and you'll obtain the supreme spiritual peace. Arjuna's like, wait a minute, I'm in the middle of a war and you're saying that by this war I'm going to be he's not getting it. And so, let's see here. Yeah, so Krishna's saying, yeah, because by doing this, you're going to be factually situated in the self. Read text 41. One who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus he is not bound by the reactions of work. So here, he's saying, that after hearing all this transcendental knowledge about the soul, about Krishna's relationship to the world, about approaching a spiritual master, and then so many glories of transcendental knowledge, then he says, through this knowledge you'll attain the supreme spiritual peace, and you'll be factually situated in the self. So you can just imagine that Arjuna is thinking, yes, I'm going to cultivate knowledge. I'm going to be peaceful. I'm going to become aware of myself as a soul, and I'm going to be happy. And then in the very next verse, Krishna sort of just like, it's like a twist, it's like you're reading a story and it's building up to what you think is going to be the ending, and then zoop, totally opposite happens. Krishna just does a complete 180-degree turnaround here, at least as far as where Arjuna thinks he's going with his arguments. And he says, therefore the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharat, stand and fight. So he's telling him, now that you've got this knowledge, now go fight. And Arjuna's like, wait, I thought you were kind of like going to say, so go, find a spiritual master and study the scriptures and be peaceful and, realize the glories of transcendental knowledge. And he's like, no. And he uses his very strong words. He says, utishtu tishtu bharata. So this word is, if you're familiar with the Mahabharata, there's many places in the scriptures where there's going to be a confrontation between two warriors, and one is fleeing, or he doesn't want to fight, so he's kind of like hightailing it, and he's about to retreat. Then the warrior who's his opponent will be like, he'll say utishta, which literally means like stand up. In other words, don't run away, don't be a coward, get up, let's fight. And Arjuna is a Kshatriya, so he understands this language. So when Krishna says utishta tishta, it's like Kshatriya call to battle. And Krishna's like, no, you're not getting out of this. Don't try to run away. So yeah. And then so that ends chapter 4. And then chapter 5 starts with this question. So I'll read the question again. Oh Krishna, first of all, you asked me to renounce work, and then you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial? So now, after studying these 3 chapters, it became clear to me how Arjuna's mindset has changed. Because we were saying before how chapter 3, he's asking, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare? So really what he wants to do is, he wants to get out of fighting. Whereas here, now after hearing all about transcendental knowledge, about the eternal soul, about Krishna's divine appearance, and about sacrifice and the process of sacrifice, it really has, that hearing of transcendental knowledge has brought Arjuna to another level. It's uplifted him from totally mundane reasoning and just material solutions to material problems, and it's getting him thinking on a more philosophical level. So yeah, it's a totally different mindset, and we can see here that his question is not just, do I really have to fight, but it's more philosophical. He's actually, you can see that he's actually open to either renouncing work or working in devotion, but he's just a little confused about which is the right thing to do. So yeah, I thought that to understand really the nature of Arjuna, how Arjuna's mindset has changed, we can look at ourselves. So it's like sometimes we have a material problem. Something breaks and we need to fix it, or someone's sick and we need to, go to the doctor or take medicine or something. And it's just an immediate material situation that needs to be dealt with in a practical way. So in the beginning of chapter 3, that's kind of Arjuna's thing. I have to fight, it's a problem. And so there's different ways that I can deal with this problem. And he's just thinking very practically how to deal with this problem. And for him, the best solution is not to fight. So he's attached to that solution. But when we have material problems in our lives, it can also, if we view them from a transcendental point of view, right? Like we've heard chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, and we kind of like step back, or we step up kind of on the balcony and look down at our lives and our problems, then we can view our material problems from a more philosophical point of view. So then it's not just that we're absorbed in our problems and our feelings and our activities, but we're able to move beyond those immediate personal concerns and begin to think philosophically about our lives. So in the case that something broke, let's say something's not working in the house. When we were in India, it was always the water pump. So the water pump is, which is a huge problem, because you don't have water. It's one thing that a Vaishnava cannot live with is water, because you got to be clean. So then the water pump's broken. What can we do? Should we try to fix it ourselves? Should we call, someone to try to fix it? How long is that going to take? Should we just go down to the hand pump and start carrying water, or what to do? So these are different practical solutions that we could come up with. But then we could also, get on the balcony and look at it from a higher point of view, and we could look at the problem philosophically. Why is it that in the material world everything is always breaking? Why is it that nothing lasts? Why is it that it's such a trip to just get my basic needs met? And why is it's so frustrating? Why do I always have to be frustrated about things? And of course, those kind of questions aren't going to make your water pump work, but they are going to help you to make progress towards a state of consciousness where you don't have to take another birth and have to keep fixing water pumps lifetime after lifetime. So, yeah, and the same thing with, with sickness. If somebody is ill, then instead of just thinking, well, should we go to the doctor? Should we get allopathic medicine? Or should we try Ayurvedic medicine? Do we want to wait that long? Or should we just, take rest and hope our immune system is going to work? Or try, some acupuncture? I mean, there's like hundreds of different ways you could tackle the problem. But then you could also look at it from a higher point of view, philosophically, and be like, why do I have to get sick? Why is my body always breaking down? And of course, when we get seriously sick, we can become fearful that that's going to be, we're not going to get better, that we could die from that illness. Like now, a lot of people are afraid. There's so much fear in the world because of coronavirus, and many people are getting sick and people are dying. And so there's a heavy atmosphere of fear of death, so that should bring us to the question that, why do I have to die? Why do I have to always be afraid? Coronavirus is one thing, but it's like, padam yat padam nitesham. There's always, our lives are always at risk. Every second, like something could happen. You never know. So why do I have to live in this precarious situation where my life is just tottering like a drop of water on a lotus petal, and any moment it can just fall down? So then we need to think, and why is it so uncomfortable? Why is the thought of death so frightening? Like, why is that? Why is there fear surrounding death? Everybody dies. Just like everybody, goes to school and everybody gets a job and we're not afraid of those things. Why are we afraid of death? because we're not meant to die. You know, it's totally unnatural for the eternal spirit soul to die. So when we start really reflecting on our lives philosophically and our little, you know, material problems, the material problems are not really the problems. Because if you think of, you know, if you're old enough to think back like 20 years, or if you're not, you can think back 10 years, some serious problem that you had 10 or 20 years ago. And if you look at it now, was it really that serious? You know, usually not. Usually it's like, okay, now you're over, you know, we're already over it. It's like done, I've moved on. And actually it might have helped me in some ways. It wasn't really such a bad problem. So those little material upsets are not the real problems. The real problems are the bigger questions. The material problems are meant to, you know, catapult us to a higher level, so we can reflect from the balcony, or from the transcendental point of view. And so that's what Arjuna is doing here. At the beginning of chapter 5, he's questioning philosophically. He's not just trying to get out of doing his duty, or trying to find a plan B because he doesn't like plan A. He really wants to know what is the most he's inquiring about, you know, Shreyas. What is the most beneficial thing for me to do in general, not necessarily with fighting, but, you know, in terms of just work in general, in terms of how to live in this world. Should I renounce work, or should I work in devotion? What is the best thing? Okay. And then because Arjuna has this higher mindset, because he's being philosophical, then if we look at the way Krishna answers the question that he's asking, he's really honoring that. He's honoring, he's kind of validating Arjuna's higher consciousness. So if you look at text 6 of chapter 5, he says, merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. So he says a thoughtful person, because now Arjuna is actually being thoughtful. And this chapter 5, whereas chapter 3, the answer to the question, Krishna's answers to the question focused on practical solutions. You know, do this because, for all the reasons, because you have to maintain your body. Do it to set an example for other people so they can maintain their bodies. Do it so the demigods will bless you and you'll get material prosperity so that you can maintain your body very nicely. So it was all very like bodily concept of life. But now he's going to emphasize thoughtfulness, this process of philosophical thinking, which is very important for devotees. And that's why Srila Prabhupada, the title that Prabhupada gave to chapter 3 is Karma Yoga. And the title he gave to chapter 5 is Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Because the stress in chapter 5 is not only on action, but it's on consciousness. And of course, Prabhupada takes it up to Krishna consciousness. And so does Krishna at the end. So yeah. And then, let's see. Yeah, the Sanskrit that he uses here in text 6, he says, Yoga Yukto Munir. So Yoga Yukto, the yoga here is referring to Karma Yoga. So he's saying, do your Karma Yoga, but Munir, but be a Muni, be a thinker, be a thoughtful person while you're doing it. Don't just do it. Don't just be active. It's not only engaging the senses. You have to also be mentally absorbed in what you're doing. And that's what he says in the next verse. He says, one who works in devotion, who's a pure soul and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone's dear to him. So it's also about controlling the mind. So yeah, Karma Yoga is not just doing material activities so that you can get material good results. That's karma. But Karma Yoga is actually like where your mind is absorbed, where you're being thoughtful. And much of chapter 5 is devoted to this idea of a state of consciousness where actually the emphasis is not on the sensual sensory activities, but on the mental focus. So in text 8 to 9, where he says, a person in divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. So he's saying that actually, yeah, we're talking about karma yoga, but the external activities of the senses are not really what's important. They're not really the most important thing. The most important thing is to keep your mind engaged within. And so you're operating on two levels. The body is acting, and like he says in text 14, that the embodied spirit, master of the city of the body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. This is all enacted by the modes of nature. So the body is acting according to the modes of nature, but the mind is equipoised. The mind is with equal vision. And that's the famous Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gabi Hastini Shuni Chaiva Sopake Cha Pandita Samadarshinaha. That the consciousness or the mind of a person who's doing karma yoga, because he's still talking about karma yoga here, is actually seeing the soul. That the soul is within the body and the activities are going on externally, but the mind is focused on spiritual self. That's what he referred to at the end of chapter 4 as being factually situated in the self. And when we are factually situated in our spiritual selves, then we can also perceive how other living beings are also factually spirit souls too. Because it starts from, okay, I'm a spirit soul. We don't think I'm a spirit soul and everybody else is their body. That I'm not this body, but this one is a cow, this one's an elephant, this is a dog, and this is a Brahmin. They're also not their bodies. They're also spirit souls. So, yeah. And then by that kind of vision, he says in text 21 that we can actually experience happiness within. He says, such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. So this reminds me of in the 5th canto where Lord Rishabhadev says that the person tapo divyam yena puchikam satyam, is it shudyad brahma sokyam shudyad yasmad brahma sokyam tvanantam, that the person who engages in this divine austerities for realization of the self comes to the transcendental platform, pure goodness, and he experiences unlimited spiritual happiness. Brahma Sokyam Tvanantam. So this is when we come to a higher consciousness. And this is what he's urging Arjuna to do. And then he continues that, he's saying that when you engage your mind within, when you connect your mind to the spiritual self within, and also to the Lord within, then you'll experience happiness. But he contrasts that in the next verse to sense pleasure. He says that actually sense pleasures are a source of misery. So happiness is within, and the external pleasures of the senses are actually not pleasures at all, but they're sources of misery. Dukkha yonaya evate. That all of the miseries of life come from that, from the contact of the senses with their objects. Why? Because they have a beginning and an end. And so, what's the point? It may feel good for a little while, taste good, smell good, look good, whatever, but it has a beginning and an end. So the wise do not delight in them. And what to do then? Just tolerate them, these interactions of the senses with their objects. Because, of course, even without trying, our senses are going to be engaged with the objects. We're going to see things. We're going to smell things. We're going to hear things. And some of those may be pleasurable. Some of those may be not pleasurable. we should just kind of be neutral and just tolerate them. That's what he says. He says in text 23, before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. And in the next verse, he again tells him, focus inward. Put your focus inward. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately, he attains the Supreme. So I'll read a little bit from this purport here. This is 524. I'll skip a little bit. A liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience. He can therefore sit silently at any place and enjoy the activities of life from within. Such a liberated person no longer desires external material happiness. This state is called Brahmabhuta, attaining which one is assured of going back to Godhead, back to home. So this is a really nice thing to meditate on. And it's a way that we can actually test our advancement in Krishna consciousness. That in any situation, a person who's truly Krishna conscious, in any situation, he or she can just sit down or stand up or whatever they're doing and be happy, because they're relishing happiness within. You can just be peaceful and spiritually enlivened by dint of your own Krishna consciousness, by dint of just knowing that I'm an eternal spirit soul. My nature is eternity, knowledge, and bliss, and I have an eternal relationship with Krishna, and just remember Krishna and connect with him through his holy names or just through remembering his form, his qualities, his pastimes, all the ways that Krishna has helped us in our lives. Because, Krishna has his pastimes that we can read about in the Krishna book, in the Bhagavatam, and the Mahabharata and things. But he also has his pastimes are ongoing. And we all have our own kind of, it sounds a little funny to say, but it's true that we all have our own pastimes with Krishna in this lifetime. Because Krishna, if we just think of all the ways that Krishna has helped us, and all the ways that Krishna has clearly, personally made arrangements for us to come closer to him, for us to do services which are just really wonderful for us, to meet people, to meet devotees who help us to come in contact with a bona fide spiritual master, and that spiritual master who's just perfect for us and who inspires us like no one else does, and to bring us to a community of devotees, to a particular temple, which is just right, which is just the perfect place for us to be right now, and he just does these things all the time. It's like daily, and these are Krishna's pastimes. If you read, in the Bhagavatam how Krishna interacts with his devotees, it's the same way that he interacts with us, although we don't see him standing before us, but he responds to the devotees' prayers. He goes and sees them when they're in trouble. He saves them from different situations, and he directs them to, talk to people that can help them. So all these things are going on. So when in any situation, we can connect with Krishna through these wonderful memories of how Krishna is very present in our lives, and we can be ecstatic, even if we're, in a crowded, in a traffic jam, or, stuck somewhere, or locked down and alone, or wherever, So it's just very wonderful what Krishna is saying here in chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita is to, be active within and rejoice within and find our happiness within. And that this is actually the perfection of karma yoga. That's what he's saying, that one whose aim is inward is the perfect mystic. He's liberated and he attains the supreme. And Prabhupada says he goes back home, back to Godhead. So this is really the goal. So we see that in chapter 3, because of Arjuna's sort of materialistic consciousness, Krishna gives him more, practical, material answers to why he should fight. But when Arjuna, in the beginning of chapter 5, after getting transcendental knowledge, he starts to inquire philosophically, then Krishna appreciates his thoughtfulness, and he actually he's like, okay, Arjuna, now you're ready for more. And he gives him this higher knowledge. He starts giving him, transcendental knowledge about, now let's look inward. Let's go deeper now. It's not just about doing the activities with the senses that you have to do, but it's about focusing inward on who you really are, on the soul, on your relationship with me. And and then in text 25, it's nice because he says that two things, that the mind should be engaged within, and then we should also work for the welfare of all living beings. I'll read it, text 25. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, and who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. So this is, let's see. Yeah, I was just thinking that the activities of karma yoga are, I mean, in one sense you could think of them as the varnashram duties, but that's not what Krishna is saying here. He's saying working for the welfare of all living beings. It says sarva bhuta hite rita, working for the welfare of all living beings. So when our duties, even our external duties of our senses, should be engaged in helping other people. And we know that from Srila Prabhupada emphasizing over and over again that the way to the real welfare work is to give people Krishna consciousness. So internally, we should be focused inward, that I'm a soul, my relationship with Krishna. And then externally, the way that we act in the world, the way we engage with the world, is by trying to increase the Krishna consciousness of the world. Let's try to give people Krishna consciousness. And that way we can achieve liberation in the Supreme. That's what Krishna is saying. And so then the 5, he finishes up. There's a little sneak preview here about Astanga Yoga or Dhyana Yoga, which he'll move into in the next chapter. Because when we focus within, what do we find within? What is there within? It's not only our spiritual soul, but it's also Krishna. And so Krishna ends chapter 5 by saying that focusing within really means being conscious of me, being conscious of Krishna. So, and then he gives us different ways how we can be conscious of him. He says, Bhoktaram yoga tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram suridam sarva bhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. That a person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So now he's gone full circle. Because before, remember, he was talking about supreme peace, attaining the supreme peace. But at that time, Arjuna couldn't understand. He's like, what? How am I going to attain peace on the battlefield? So here it is. He's saying, this is how you attain peace. By focusing inward and focusing on me. Because I am your best friend. I'm your ever well-wisher. I'm the benefactor of all living entities. And so if you just focus on me and understand that everything that you do is for me, for my pleasure, because I'm the ultimate beneficiary. And why should I be the ultimate beneficiary? Because I'm the Lord of all planets and demigods. Everything here has come from me. Everything here belongs to me. And so if you just offer your work to me, then you'll get so much benefits because I'm the benefactor. It's interesting because he uses the word beneficiary, that Krishna's the beneficiary, but he's also the benefactor. So we should do things for his benefit, And by doing so, he's going to do things for our benefit. So it's just a whole big loving exchange. It's like offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing your mind and confidence in point, accepting prasad, offering. We offer food to Krishna, and then we eat the prasadam. We, use our energy to serve Krishna. Krishna engages his energies to try to help us. We, ask questions to Krishna. We pray to Krishna, and Krishna reveals knowledge from within our hearts. So by this interaction with Krishna, again, these pastimes with Krishna that our lives are based on, the life of a devotee is really thriving on these constant interactions with Krishna, then we can attain peace. That's where peace comes from. So even if you're in the middle of a battlefield, or even if you're, nowadays it's like the whole world is like a battlefield. It's just so difficult to do anything in the world today. So like complicated just to, so much. If you just want to do one little thing, it's like so much paperwork or people you got to talk to or trouble to get there and do this and that. So the whole thing is like a battlefield, and especially now, it's like even to go to the supermarket and buy groceries, it's like a whole big trip. So yeah, but in any situation, even where people are, getting sick and dying and everything is shut down and you can't do what you need to do and there's financial crisis and you got kids at home and they're bored stiff and, it's a time of great tension. But even amidst all of this, we can attain the supreme peace by just focusing inward on Krishna and our eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. And so that is the message of chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita. And that's why chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita is so important and so much further progressed than chapter 3. So the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna starts, it keeps going up, 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 and up, up, up and away until Arjuna really comes to the point of full surrender in bhakti yoga. So I guess that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Are there any questions? I guess whoever's listening online could type a message into the message prompts on your computer, or I have a few devotees here. If any of you have some questions.
I don't really have a question, but it's just a thought that what you said in this. I really like this verse. I was reading this the other day, the 25. So one who actually works for the welfare of all of the entities, that's real work. So
yeah.
Actually, like Karma Yoga, we think of like this, we're not sure like this is not But Krishna's not really recommending that. He's recommending that everything we do should be for the welfare of all the entities.
Yeah.
So he's recommending like basically Krishna.
Yeah.
That's real work.
Yeah.
We should do. And that's what Arjuna is doing on the battlefield. He's not just doing anything, he's preaching.
Yeah. How is he preaching?
Because Krishna, he's setting the right example, one, for us. He's creating this conversation so we can understand that. So
yes.
He's preaching, and he's carrying out Krishna's orders, so that's his spiritual master in that situation.
Okay,
so
good.
He's preaching for us.
Yeah.
So that's real work, not like the work that we kind of have in our mind.
Okay, let me just, because I think they didn't hear you very well. So, yes, Amrita here is asking, she's not asking, she's making a comment. She's saying that she really liked what Krishna said in verse 25, chapter 5, 25, about working for the welfare of all living beings. And she was pointing out that actually Arjuna on the battlefield, he's working for she was saying that work for other living beings means preaching. And even Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra is preaching. So I asked her, how is he preaching on the battlefield? And she said very enlightenedly, very, very wisely, that he's preaching because he's setting the example for others by doing his duty. And also, he's not just doing his Varnashram duty, but he's also, there's Varnashram Dharma and there's also Sanatan Dharma. So he's doing both because he's doing his Varnashram Dharma as a Kshatriya, And he's also doing Sanatan Dharma in following the order of the spiritual master. So by setting that example of taking the order of the spiritual master as one's life and soul, even if at one's personal inconvenience, and just doing it with determination, that's actually wonderful preaching that the whole world should follow. And if they do, then they can very easily become transcendental and go back to Godhead. Okay? All right. Thank you for your comment. It's very nice. Something else? Is there something here? Please open this chat in a new window so you can see the other chat. Is that to me? I'll try. So. I don't see anything there. Not sure how to do that.
I like that point you mentioned about how in chapter 3 it's more of a practical approach to Krishna bringing forward. In this chapter 5 it's more of the consciousness talks about. What's in general a good balance? Because we see we need both. What's a good balance to know? Well, yeah, having practical approaches, but at the same time, making a general compass shift or a general consciousness shift is also crucial so that we can make the right practical steps.
Yeah.
What's the right?
Okay, let me repeat the question. So, Anantavala Prabhu was asking, well, he's saying that he liked how in chapter 3, Krishna gave very practical instructions. And then in chapter 5, it's more about our consciousness. So he's understanding that actually we need to be conscious, we need to be Krishna conscious, but we also need to act practically in the world. So what is the balance, or how to, juggle those? How do those two things fit together? So what I would say is that, we definitely have to do both. And I feel like what Krishna is stressing here is the consciousness aspect. And the reason is because we know that in the material world, everything sort of starts from the subtle and goes to the gross, right? Even the whole creation, it goes from subtle to gross, and then to more gross to more. So then when our consciousness is right, we'll be right. When our consciousness is in the mode of goodness, then we'll be able to live in the mode of goodness. When our consciousness is enlightened, our actions will be enlightened. So if we invest in Krishna consciousness, then our actions will be always beneficial to others and also to ourselves. And it's like, let's say if you have a problem, just any old mundane problem, like we were saying before, someone's sick or something broke or something like that, and you're like in the mode of ignorance or in the mode of passion, then, in the mode of ignorance, you're not going to know what to do and what not to do. You're just going to get depressed about it, and you're going to just be overwhelmed and not be able to function because you've got a problem. If you're in the mode of passion, you'll just do something really, hastily and without proper care or consideration, without considering options. You just take the first thing that seems to fix it, and it may not be the best thing, and it may actually make it worse. So, but if you're in the mode of goodness, then you're going to consider options. You're going to think about the consequences of, okay, I could do this. What will happen like that? No, that's not a good result. So what about this? What could happen like that? And so we get a more clarity, because the result of goodness is illumination and knowledge and happiness. And so when our consciousness is in the mode of goodness, then we'll be able to solve our practical problems and just work practically in the material world from a place of clarity and illumination, and that will make us happy. So, and then if we go beyond that to the transcendental consciousness, where we're Krishna conscious, then it's a matter of our actions will be whatever's favorable for devotional service, whatever's pleasing to Krishna, and avoiding whatever's unfavorable. And we'll be also guided from within about how to do those things practically. And that's one of the really nice things about, Krishna saying, focus within, whose aim is inward, and who, what's he say? Who is active and rejoices within. Because it's from within that we also get guidance from within. When we're listening to that inner voice of Paramatma, and also, after we've been devotees for several years, we also, when you have some level of maturity in Krishna consciousness, you can also think intelligently about your life, and you can use your experiences in Krishna consciousness to just kind of like inform your own actions now in the present. So, but we need to be thoughtful. That requires us being thoughtful and taking the time to put it all in perspective. So, yeah, I feel like we definitely need to act in this world, but we should make sure that our actions are guided by higher consciousness. Yeah, so consciousness is really crucial. Okay. All right then. So I don't see anything here. So I guess that we can finish. Thank you all very much for your kind attention, and I hope you enjoyed the class. This was a new thing for me. It was kind of fun. I hope it all went well for you too. Hare Krishna.